There are deep concerns about the birth rate, fertility rate, and that is abortion. Abortion is an existential crisis, especially when we're looking at less than replacement rates for this country.
What do you mean? First of all, I don't disagree with you on abortion. I want to do everything we can to end abortion. Our plan, which is more choice, more life, is about addressing the fact that 52% of abortions in this country are among women who say that one of the major factors was their inability to afford a baby. And I want to make sure that is not their consideration. But let me ask you this. When you say the fertility problem is due to abortion, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's compounded by it. So
you mean it's because fewer people are having babies?
Yeah. I don't think abortion is the principal reason we're facing a replacement level price
problem. There's a global fertility issue right now.
But
I would say that has to do with toxics in the environment.
Plastics in the balls.
Well, there's a lot of stuff. There's
that's true. That was in the news.
No. There's PFAs. There's forever chemicals. There's astrazine. There's microplastics in male testicles. There's fluoride. There's glyphosate. Out of all these things, what do you think is the biggest concern? Because there's a lot of things in our environment.
Fertility.
When it comes to when it comes to our larger health crisis, do you think it's PFAs, forever chemicals, astrazine, fluoride, microplastics, glyphosate? What is the top concern for you biologically?
I'll tell you something interesting, which might answer that. There are the autism. We've got crises in 4 categories of diseases. Obesity, which is sort of linked to diabetes, autoimmune disease. And obesity's gone from when my uncle was president about 13% to 50% of kids today obese or grossly overweight. Autoimmune diseases, which is juvenile diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, lupus, all these exotic diseases. Diabetes, when I was a kid, the average physician saw 1 case of diabetes in his lifetime over a 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is pre-diabetic or diabetic. And the cost of diabetes, which is mitochondrial dysfunction, is now larger than the military budget, and nobody's asking where this is coming from. Neurological disease, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, autism. When I was in my generation, 70-year-old men, the rate of autism is 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, it's 1 in every 34, according to CDC, 1 in every 22 boys. So what happened? Congress, and there's one other category, which is allergic diseases, which is peanut allergies, eczema. None of these. I had 11 siblings. I had 70 cousins. I never knew anybody with a food allergy, a peanut allergy, but 5 of my 7. Why do 5 of my 7 kids have it? What happened? Something happened. Nobody's asking what it is. And there's an EPA, where Congress said to EPA, tell us what year the autism epidemic began. And EPA is a captive agency, but it's captive by oil and coal, not by big pharma. So it actually did a real study, and it came back and said it's a red line 1989. So and as it turns out, almost all of these diseases follows that timeline. And this explosion of chronic disease, we go from 6% to 60%. And there's a famous doctor, a toxicologist in New York named Phil Landrigan. I've used him on a lot of my cases, suing all kinds of big industries for toxins. He's one of the most revered toxicologists in the world. He looked at this issue and he said, you have to figure out a toxin. And these are being called because this disease is being caused by toxic exposures. It can't be genes. Genes don't cause epidemics. You need environmental exposure. And, the genes can provide a vulnerability, but you need that toxin. So what could it be? That became ubiquitous in 1989. And there's a couple of other flags identifying signals. One of those that the neurological injuries affect boys at a 4 or 5 to 1 rate as girls. So he went and looked at this, and he came down with he's done a series of papers on this question. So I'm getting to your answer. He came down with about 13 things, and among them are glyphosate from Roundup, which follows that timeline exactly, neonicotinoid pesticides, atrazine, which is now in 70% of our water supply, PFOAs and PFASs, which are flame retardants. I litigated the biggest case on that, and they made a movie about my case called Dark Waters, and it was starring Mark Ruffalo. It's a flame retardant that was put in all of our kids' pajamas, all of our furniture that year, and around that time, 1989. Fluorides, all of these byproducts, these endocrine disruptors that are part of plastics, high fructose corn syrup.
Oh yeah,
right. And then cell phone radiation. One of the exposures is ultrasound, which I don't think has a lot to do with it, but it became ubiquitous on exactly that timeline. So, the problem is that NIH will not let anybody study this. If you're a scientist, you try to study this, you can't get funded. And if you do manage to get funded, your career is over. They will destroy you. So NIH has turned from when I was a kid. It did cutting edge science. It was the gold standard science agency in the world. Now, it is just an incubator for pharmaceutical products.
So I want to go to the broader because I want to try. I want to try and get as many subjects in as possible. But back to abortion and the fertility rate, just to stay on that point and elaborate. You mentioned existential crisis, the things that Biden and Trump aren't talking about, the things you are talking about, especially what you just talked about, I think is one of the most important. And I'll add this as an aside. In our studio, we do have plastic bottled water, but we have refillable glass bottles for people to take if you don't want to use the plastic for this reason. And then we have plastic because it is ubiquitous. It's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to order. I know we have.
Yeah, it's hard to live without it.
But we bought reusable glass bottles that we fill up with our own filtered well water, specifically because of the issue of, biphenyls and all of these things. But the issue with abortion, there are people on the right who they've brought this up to us on the show, pro-lifers, people who want to see it banned federally in every capacity, saying when you're dealing with below replacement level fertility, abortion just exacerbates the issue. So to them, it does seem existential. I don't know that abortion is the principal reason for dropping infertility. I think a lot of everything you brought up is actually a really good reason for this, the toxic exposure and all of these things. But my point ultimately was that abortion certainly is existential for a lot of people if babies' lives are being ended.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need a government that prioritizes the family.
I don't think, I think the argument, you kind of lose me on the argument about abortion and the decline, fertility rate decline and decline in population, that we need to force women to carry babies to term in order to keep, a national population level. I don't think to me, that's not a compelling argument. The compelling argument is the moral argument that abortion at some point, particularly when the baby reaches viability, is, at the end of the term is like homicide, right? It's and throughout there, people have different arguments, different opinions of it, and I respect everybody's opinion. But there's a moral case from day one for not doing it, and that moral argument to me is the most compelling argument and the most difficult argument, the most complex argument. The other argument that you made about replacement rates is a really important argument for all these toxics in our environment, but when it comes to, there's so many other complexities. The state going to tell a woman who does not want to bring a child to term that you're going to force them to do that. So, so these are all kind of very complex, difficult, heartbreaking issues, and every abortion is a tragedy. Everyone is a trauma. To me, there's no simple issue. I come from a family that is split on it. I've gone back and forth on the issue. When I learn more material, my position has shifted slightly.
Well,
but it's because it's such a tough issue.
I completely agree. I think there's of all the issues, this one has zero middle ground at all. You had got a lot of flack because you were in an interview where you said that the state and the federal government should not be involved in any capacity. and you were asked if should abortion be allowed even up to full term, you had said yes. You had then changed your position. And do you want to clarify and give it?
Do you want me to tell you the evolution of my thinking?
Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what I always say to people is you can never convince me of things by telling me it's the politically, beneficial thing to do, or by calling me names, or by, doing all the things that I've had all the defamations and perjuries that have been applied to me. That's not going to change my mind about anything. What will change my mind is facts. So my original position on abortion, which made sense to me when I was asked just off the cuff without thinking about it, by an NBC reporter very early in the campaign when I was in Iowa. She said, "What's your position?" And I said, "Well, I think it has to be up to a woman, 100% up to a woman, up to the point of viability. And then the state has an escalating interest in protecting that life." So I got a tremendous amount of flack from the left, and also at home from my wife, her sisters, or her sister and her sister's wife were big supporters of mine, but we're absolutely, it is always a woman's choice. In the state, you've been a medical freedom advocate for your entire life. You've been fighting for people's bodily autonomy more than anybody in this country. You've taken more flack from it. Now you're trying to take that choice away from the woman. And so I then changed my position and said, it's a woman's choice right up to the end. Now the question for me was, my assumption and my wife's assumption is there's no woman who's going to get pregnant and carry that pregnancy to 9 months and have an abortion, the 9th month. Who would do that? The only reason that would happen in my mind was if either the baby had some illness that he was only going to live for maybe 24 hours or 2 weeks and then have an agonizing death, or if the mother's life, there's some medical issue with the mother's life is at risk. And in those cases particularly, I don't want to invite the state in to have anything to do with it. I don't want a bureaucrat having anything to do with it. The mother should be making that decision.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.